In this video, I just want to break down a model I built recently, explain what it does, why it does that, why I built it, and a few interesting things it points out. All that stuff. So, I was just tooling around with some data, and I decided, because I had a question I wanted to answer, which is literally where the best things come from, in my opinion. I wanted to know what players' ADP should be or would be on average based on their performance in a season so far, where they were drafted before the season started, and what career year they were in, because in Dynasty that has a large effect. Now, I could have done a little bit better with it, I think, if I included draft round, because we take that into account as well. But by and large, I think it did pretty well. Let me show you. And expand it a little bit. Okay, so, like you see the outlier over here, this little blue dot, that's, let's see, ADP predicted to be 255, and he was actually ranked 76th overall. That's Jalen Hurts. Because at the end of his rookie season in 2020, he only played 4 games at the very end of the season. So his points per game, because he actually had stats throughout the season, but only really started those last 4 games, was actually particularly low. It was like 8.6 instead of something like 20.3. And so the points per game was a little bit of a lie, and that's why the model got it wrong. So it's fairly explainable, right? And over here, the outlier in terms of it was projected to be pretty high, around 63rd overall, and he actually came in 217th overall in the following year's ADP on DLF. That's Calvin Johnson. That's the year he didn't finish the season out, and we were pretty sure by the end of the season he might be considering retirement, and so ADP adjusted quite drastically and efficiently. And the model just simply doesn't know stuff like that. It just knows his points per game was pretty good. He was in a career year we really shouldn't underrate. And his ADP the previous year had been pretty high. So the outliers on either side, on either end of the spectrum, are mostly explainable just by knowing what was going on that season. Now, obviously, there are still some other outliers, and it's not perfect. But if you look through the underlying model data and stuff about the R squared for each position, this is tight ends. This has got a 68% R squared, and running backs was a 65 R squared. So it's hitting in and around 70% wide receiver, actually. It's doing a fairly good job of predicting what a player's ADP was going to be just based on his points per game, his career year, and where he was drafted the previous year. So why did I build this thing? Essentially, it's just to get an idea of where people might be underrating certain players, right? Because I was thinking a lot about, I'm having a hard time getting over my Puka Nacua dislike as a rookie profile, and I was wondering where else it might show up. Or the hype trains aren't as loud, and so the ADP isn't adjusting effectively on it. I also found these first results here. These are the highest projected players according to my ADP model. It's Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, Devin Achane, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb. These are all interesting because they all get negative ADP predictions. In other words, Tyreek Hill should go off the board 4 rounds before a startup draft even starts. But that kind of makes sense, right? Because he's having this career-making year, and honestly, fairly unprecedented scoring year overall. And so it makes sense that his points per game, which in 2023 is currently 26.5, is kind of unprecedented. And since he was already drafted really highly, this August he was drafted 14th overall, there's nowhere else for the model to put him. And so it just projects him into a phantom round. But we can sort that out just by sorting by the raw score that it gives him and saying he's projected to be the 101. Now, obviously he's not. And I think that's interesting because he's in a career year 8, so his ADP is actually set to fall if you look at the trends of the model overall. And just because we start to dislike players when they get to around age 29, especially at wide receiver, even if their performance keeps up. But it also says that if you're on a winning team and if you have Tyreek Hill, you shouldn't fear that you have Tyreek Hill following into the next season because his ADP should be higher than it's probably going to be. And it'll probably maintain a little better than it would have if he was Devontae Adams this year, for example, or even Cooper Kupp. And so I found those results interesting, especially since Devin Achane's only working off a 4-game sample for his ADP, and Most of those games were highly touchdown influenced, obviously with a 25 points per game this year so far. But hopefully he can get back to playing healthy and his points per game can rebound to something like human. And we'll get a more accurate projection. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, the guy who's been my wide receiver 3 in Dynasty for a little while, is currently projected to be the wide receiver 4 based on his actual points per game performance, a model that pretty accurately predicts ADP, using DLF at least. And I thought that was nice to see as well. Also, Christian McCaffrey, being team old guy at the running back position, is also getting a fairly healthy prediction. And it doesn't suggest we should be overly concerned that he's in career year 7, which again fits in with a lot of our breakout trends and career arc stuff that we've done in the offseason. So the next interesting question in the same vein is something we had in the Dynasty Grind this week. Hopefully you're tuning into our weekly live stream, since that is a thing I'm able to keep up with every week instead of these individual videos. I put Sam Laporta at 2, and I actually advanced up because we were doing Superflex, CJ Stroud to 1. But looking at where players would be on average if these were average profiles, just looking at career year, previous year ADP, and current year points per game, Devin A-Chain obviously is the exception just because his points per game is too high based on that small sample and those touchdown-infused games. I found it interesting that Jordan Addison, looking at average profiles, should actually still be drafted higher in August. He's not going to be. This is mostly held back because, Puka Nacua was drafted so phenomenally low because he's such an exception to the third-round rookie draft role. He's drafted 185th overall this offseason in DLF ADP, and the average jump, even with a 19.1 points per game, could only jump him up 59% of what he was drafted at, and which puts him in as a top 40 Dynasty player. Now, Jordan Addison, who's got a 15.8 points per game, which is lower than Puka Nacua, but because he was drafted so much higher this offseason, I think it makes sense that the model thinks he should still be valued higher on average, looking at that red trend line through the blue dots, right? It also tells me that if I'm in Dynasty, I kind of want to trade into Jordan Addison, even if I'm using Puka Nacua, because removing the bias of what we've experienced and what we think and everything else, and just looking at career year, points per game, and where we were drafting him, since ADP is pretty efficient at that, it says that Jordan Addison should still be at least as valued as Puka Nacua. I'm not sure he is in Dynasty. Bijan Robinson has been dropped significantly by the model. It's placing him, well, let's ignore Devin A-Chain. It's placing him 4th overall in single quarterback drafts, if this was a rookie draft class projection. And that seems a little unfair because we kind of know what's been going on with the Falcons, and his points per game when healthy and on the field. It's kind of been what we've been expecting, but his touch volume has not been everything I would have expected, or I did expect. But it is a notable feature that Gibbs is now considered by this ADP model to have done better, performed better, based on an average since 2014, enough that he should now be drafted higher than Bijan Robinson. I think that's fairly interesting. And of course, Sam Laporta gets a significant bump up. The most significant jump up for rookie players based on their ADP, let's look at the top 3 here, is Jordan Addison, because again, that 15.8 points per game really shouldn't be underrated, but it's going to be because Puka Nacua is a star. Puka Nacua and Sam Laporta. The 3 biggest fallers is going to be Bijan Robinson, obviously, because he was drafted like in the top 14 picks in Dynasty, I think. But also Gibbs is actually falling because the running backs haven't been doing well this season. Jackson Smith-Njigba is projected to fall by 45% of his ADP from this August to next August. Zach Charbonnet, Quentin Johnson, and Tank Bigsby, and I think they all make logical sense. The other thing I found interesting looking at this list was to filter by highest and lowest, and while it's not the best way of looking for it, to look for different types of players to target based on different situations of your team. Again, removing the bias of what we actually think of players and just looking at what happens on average. So if we look at the biggest fallers this year, I think this is a good list of players to go and make offers on if you're on a competitive roster. Now that doesn't make perfect sense because that's not exactly what it's trying to do. For example, trading for Nick Chubb on a competitive roster doesn't make a lot of sense, but you could fit it into a trade, right? You're going to find very little value in trying to add draft picks to trades if you're a competitive team trying to trade with a less competitive team. But you might be able to add Nick Chubb, and while his ADP is set to fall this August, according to the ADP model, that matters less to you because you have a competitive team and you know Nick Chubb, when and if he gets healthy again, is going to score points. And so that might be a way of you're building your points per game next year rather than thinking about pure value in terms of draft capital. So you could fit it into a competitive roster. Everything else makes sense as well. And while Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and T. Higgins have been disappointing, these would all make good ways of adding value to your team and points per game. 4 players are more likely to be falling in estimation for your teammates, because that's essentially what the model's doing. Where on average, based on 2014 to 2021 results, has the market, your league mates, most league mates in most leagues, ended up liking players less because of their current in-season performance. And so these players are more points and points next season plays because their ADP is more likely to fall. But plenty of them are still in their prime years. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Bijan Robinson, they're all very early on in their career. So they're adding a few points this year, and they're more likely to add points to your team last year while their value in your league mates estimation is falling. Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, Devontae Adams, these are all older players. 3 of them at least putting up pretty good points, and Devontae Adams struggling a little bit. And even T. Higgins in his 4th career year should fall in ADP. So whoever's rostering them right now, if they're a non-competitive team, might be less interested in having T. Higgins right now than your first and, Tank Dell or some other young promising rookie that they like, who's a bit more of a maybe a boat, but you can trade for a more solid player and a value sum, adding value and even a little points per game to your season as a competitive roster. So I actually think this is a solid way of looking for players to send offers on in a Dynasty League using this kind of model. And you can also go the opposite way as well, obviously, by looking at the biggest rises. So these will be the biggest sells on competitive teams, or in fact the biggest buys on non-competitive teams, which is a little backwards, but it does put you in an interesting thought process, right? Because Travis Etienne is a pure win now player because he's a running back scoring amazingly this year. But his ADP is set to rise by 40% this offseason on average using my model, which means his value is going to hit peak by this August. Like, that's probably going to peak value he's ever going to hold. And so on a competitive roster, you can trade him for a lot to more teams than you could have before the season started and maybe push your team over the edge, despite the fact you're using a highly competitive player. Like, that wouldn't be a player I would have suggested off the top of my head, but it makes some kind of sense when you think about his value arc and where his value is to your league mates moving forward. So if you're a competitive team with Travis Etienne, you can add a lot to your team this year at peak value for what... Now, I'm not saying you're definitely going to get a trade I would do, but it's an interesting headspace to be in to think about a competitive roster doing that. And that's what I should be looking for as a building team. I'm looking to add value to my roster because points per game matters less to me. Travis Etienne isn't the prime example, but I thought he was a really interesting person to end up on that list, and it gave me some interesting ideas for a few of my leagues, so I thought I'd throw it out to you. The rest kind of make a little bit more sense. Jordan Addison, as we talked about, he should be the biggest rookie riser. I don't think he's gonna be, but he should be valued there, and he should be valued as at least a top 20 player in Dynasty by this August, according to this model, and I've had him there for a while according to my ranks. So yeah, get Jordan Addison. It's always a good day to get Jordan Addison. Puka Nacua, Zach Moss, and Kyren Williams are more this year plays. Again, there are just some inputs this very basic model doesn't understand, i.e. their value is going to drop out. But to be fair, think about it, Kyren Williams and Zach Moss aren't going to be drafted higher in August than they were last August. Their value is going to rise from last year. Now, again, that matters relatively little to most Dynasty squads because those two players aren't going to be very easy to trade this August when they're not scoring points and they were really a one-year blow-up kind of, or they're going to be seen as a one-year kind of, those were the deeper running backs to roster, but probably not next year. But technically, it kind of makes sense. So I'll probably draw the line right there. If you're a non-competitive team, trading for them makes some sense in a way. But adding more input just to context of the situation and the way Dynasty works, that's probably not a great idea. Or for Alvin Kamara for that matter, just because he's going to be very hard to trade at that value. But to that point, Jazz Fresh on the Dynasty Grind made a really good point that Alvin Kamara is very distant from Christian McCaffrey in terms of overall value. And the model thinks so too. It thinks it should be Alvin Kamara should be drafted at least 40 spots after Christian McCaffrey. But it also thinks it should be drafted, again if we ignore Devin A-Chain, as the 4th running back overall in Dynasty by this August. And he's not going to be. So I think that's a really good way of explaining what Jazz Fresh on the Dynasty Grind this week was trying to point out, that Alvin Kamara is severely underrated in Dynasty in terms of value because of his points per game. And again, he's doing it again this year. Even though he's in his 7th career year this year, he should be valued higher than Kenneth Walker. And based on previous trends and how the ADP has gone from one season to the next, he's not gonna be. Anyway, I thought there were some really interesting things that the model spot popped up. I'm going to post it in the Discord. I've already posted some of the results in there, so if you're interested in it, I'll post this sheet and the formula, and you already have access to all my ADP data through my Patreon as well. So, I found that really interesting and got me back enjoying looking through data instead of trying to create content, just trying to answer some questions for myself that I thought could help me in Dynasty, and I'm hoping they'll help you as well. Spat it out. I also enjoy putting the data together and making it look all pretty and stuff. So let me know what you think. I find that stuff interesting and a lot more fun to report on or make a video on than any of the other subjects I came up with, like who are the top 5 Dynasty buys. I don't care. Any list you come up with is going to be perfectly fine. Go get those guys. I don't care. But anyway, sorry. I'm going to get out of here. Hopefully this makes some sort of video. If not, at least I got some practice talking in front of the camera again. Appreciate you. See you in the next one.